So Nicaragua and Iran are uniting against the U.S. sanctions, and Syria has also joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. These are very, very, very key things happening here. We've talked about them in Nicaragua with Jonny, but we're going to continue to cement that because it's extremely important shifts happening. So Samuel Romani tweeted, breaking: Iran and Nicaragua discuss forming a union of countries resisting U.S. sanctions. This is big. Now you're seeing these alliances being built, and that's what during the inauguration of Daniel Ortega is what we saw. So Brian A. Nichols, of course, tweeted that at their, quote, inauguration, Ortega Murillo were joined on stage by Diaz-Canel and Nicolas Maduro and Mohsen Rezai, and in Iranian implicated in the bombing of EMEA, which was entirely false, by the way. There's a great Gray Zone article on that. In Argentina, democracies in our hemisphere can't afford to look away as Ortega Murillo undermined democracy and regional security. So democracies in our hemisphere, the United States is not a democracy. Again, they just flippantly lie, and they know this, and they're just angry, right? So I quote tweeted and said, they're mad. They're mad that there was this unity with Diaz-Canel from Cuba, with like these leaders, Nicolas Maduro and others. There was a Chinese high-ranking politician in Nicaragua as well that day. So they're mad that these alliances are happening. There was also Russian representatives. So you have China, Russia, Iran. You have these alliances happening. And so they're pushing this propaganda because they know that they're losing their unilateral power. And at the conference we had where we were talking about how we were standing, the U.S. and North America delegations were standing against the sanctions imposed by the United States on Nicaragua, we talked about how there was a shift. Terry mentioned this is a bilateral relationship. It's ending the unilateral relationship in the United States. And what we mean by that is that the United States no longer has the power it once had to be the bully, to call the shots. And they know this, and they're afraid of it, which is why they're going to double down. So
I have a question real quick.
Huh?
I have a real quick question before you get to the things for you and stuff like that, because this is something that, my mother asked me the other day, and I said, well, let me ask Fia on that because she was just recently there. Do you think that Nicaragua is accepting in China just to push buttons of the Americans, to rub it in their face, to be like, F you, you're going to throw sanctions on we're going to make deals with your adversaries? Or do you really think that they need China in this particular situation, that it's going to really help them with their infrastructure and all the other trade and everything like that?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this in our really great, you guys should watch it, Code Pink, What the F is Happening in Latin America, with Terry and Camilla and Jonny, where I firmly believe, and I think they would agree with me from what we discussed, that this isn't about pushing the U.S. buttons. I think for some of the population that, has lived under the sanctions and has seen the effects of U.S. imperialism, they're like, fuck that. But for Ortega and for politically, the sanctions are happening, and sanctions are, of course, an act of siege war. And we know that sanctions directly affect the working people, especially when it comes to food and having enough food and ability to sustain your country. So they've been hyper-focused on being self-sustainable through agriculture, through getting people involved in agriculture again. They're not as hyper-focused on urbanization as other nations are. Their focus is on creating food supply, which is something that we talk about doing here in the States because of what's happening. So they have the right idea. And so their focus is that, but they're going to be impacted, and they already are, by these sanctions. And if they don't build alliances with people who are also being sanctioned, and what are they going to do? So that they're doing exactly what I would do and exactly what I think a lot of people would be doing. And they're building alliances and coalitions with people who are being sanctioned by the U.S. They're trading products with Iran. They're also going to do the same with China. Economically, it would benefit not just Nicaragua, but the entire Central American region to have a new canal that is not controlled by the United States via trade, which would be the interoceanic canal that would unite the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans, where you could have free trade and it wouldn't be at the behest of the United States. Plus, it's going to be newer and allow bigger ships to come in, which is the Panama Canal hasn't been used as much because a lot of ships can't get through it either. And so a lot of people in the region, not just Nicaragua, are very much in favor with these relationships because they want jobs to be brought to their countries and they want new abilities to expand their economies which their economies right now are as self-sufficient as Nicaragua is and is ahead compared to Venezuela and Cuba, that they didn't have that advantage of understanding what was happening. They're learning from these countries and they're adapting as well as they might try to do that. It really would benefit them greatly, especially even to explore tourism in Nicaragua and other things and other avenues. So I definitely think it's more of an economic situation rather than a tit for tat, so to speak.
You know, aside my questions about the canal and the dam, by the way, fam, it being like, how do we make it from going from freshwater to saltwater in those lakes? That's kind of like a science question, and I'd love to get like into that with some nerds. But in this particular situation, and this is why I think we need an interview with Ortega down the road, the fact is that, yes, okay, so this would be better for them when it comes to trade, being able to control, you know, this particular dam if they pull this off, left, you know, more tourism coming there. But it's also got to make Ortega kind of also, you know, he's got to be aware of the fact that if he does these moves right here and he makes these moves with China and he has a dam and then a canal that goes across, that's got to prompt the U.S. to get more crazy and actually send in more proxies, probably 10 times harder than before. Because, you know, the U.S., especially when it comes to trade, is not going to sit back and say, okay, they're not going to have a canal. So there's going to be more pushback through way of proxies, whether he's going to try to get in gangs from neighboring countries or maybe, you know, more blockades in the water, more submarines. I don't know. But, I mean, he has to be aware of this. And how is Ortega going to counter this if he tries to pull off these bold moves?
By making these alliances that they're making right now. And the thing is to not be afraid, to not be tepid. We've seen what happens when a leader is tepid against U.S. imperialism, when they try to play both sides and please both sides. I think this is the right move in terms of opposing U.S. imperialism, because again, the United States is losing their grip on this unilateral power. So they know this, and China is a worthy person to have on your side right now. With China lifting its people out of poverty. Now we know China is a superpower, right? So obviously tread lightly for any superpower. But China doesn't have military bases all over the world. They just don't, not to this degree. And so I'm not trying to say that they're perfect. I'm not trying to say that anybody is perfect. I'm not trying to ignore certain situations that are happening. I am saying for the Nicaraguan people, what they have literally told us is that we want this relationship because it's going to help us. It's not because they're trying to just unite with China because they want to piss the states off. And specifically, they said because China and us have the same goal, is to get people out of poverty. So that's if China's saying we want to lift people out of poverty, and they have, and Nicaragua is saying that, and China, by the way, has helped other countries like Bolivia to lift some people out of poverty and build infrastructure in these countries where there is absolutely none. So they're going to do that. They would be stupid not to do that. You can't. I would want Nicaragua to be self-sufficient, but right now they're trying as much as they try. If they were by themselves, the United States would just come in. But having other allies kind of prevents that from happening that quickly. And so I think that's what is one of the good reasons why they're doing that.
The thing that pisses me off, Fan, by the way, too, as well, is this is where the progressives should be. The progressives should be pushing our government to go, what are you doing? All right, if you're so concerned with China coming in and whatnot, instead of threatening and trying to bully Nicaragua, go make a deal with them business-wise, right? Like, let's go and let's send our companies in there that we're going to help them do what they need to do with their country to pull people out of poverty. But we never do that. And the fact is, I know we never do that because we want to put our boot on their necks. But the fact that the progressives in this country, the real progressives, aren't pushing for that type of kind of behavior in relationships in the global south. They're just accepting it, what the empire does, right, because it's just too far out of their purview, and they're not nuanced enough to look at our empire and our foreign policy the way we do, and the way some of us do, like the gray zone and all these other people. That's what pisses me off. If we wanted to, if we had a government that was represented by the people, we can say that you don't need China to help you out. We'll help you out because we're good old America. We have engineering, we have people, we can go down there, but we're not doing that. Instead, we allow our government to go with the boot on the neck route, and now it's going to come back and kick us right in the ass.
Right. And this is a good thing I think, for diversifying such a big centralized power that the United States has been. So I'm just going to go through this quickly. The Iran official proposed the formation of countries, a union against these sanctions. So There was Tehran, in Tehran, Iran. Iran's Vice President for Economic Affairs, Mohsen Rezai, has proposed formation of a union with participation of the resistant countries against the sanctions and the excessive demands of the bullying powers. And it's not just the U.S., it's their NATO allies. So they're saying they should stand against the U.S. sanctions and plots. He said in a meeting with Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega, this literally just happened. And in his remarks, he said that the Iranian nation and government pay special respect to Nicaragua's resistance against excessive demands. He stressed that the resident country should make further efforts to expand their relations and friendship because the bullying powers, particularly the U.S., are after preventing nations' development and cooperation. The United States wants people dependent on them. This is what's happening. He also noted that Iran stood by Nicaragua and is ready to strengthen its ties. And of course, Ortega thanked him. And so said these relationships were deep and cordial, that he pays his respects to General Qasem Soleimani. To many Iranians, he was a hero, and he's been vilified, of course, in media by the West. And of course, we know that what happened to him, and we know that he was assassinated. And of course, the Nicaraguan President Ortega also appreciated Iran's power during the talks with the world powers in Vienna and defended Iran's right to use peaceful nuclear energy as well. And so, they've been meeting, and they've been having these talks, which is extremely important. And they want to have these ties in mining, energy, and oil. This is very important when we're talking, of course, in the context of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. What does the United States, NATO, the West want to do? They want to privatize these mining industries. They want to privatize energy and oil. These countries have so many amazing natural resources. We're talking about volcanoes, rich minerals. And this is exactly what, the Klaus Schwabs of the world want to absolutely privatize. So you have to build alliances to stop that. Now, we can talk about how Xi Jinping is attending the World Economic Forum. I don't think Xi Jinping is a representative of what Nicaragua is going to do, what these other countries are going to do. We're going to see exactly how they operate. They're not going to allow, I think, based on just being there and seeing how they are and seeing like their fears and everything, they're not going to allow a country to come in and like dictate them, whether it's the United States or China, but they are going to welcome people who are going to provide a more equitable relationship. And that's what's happening as well.
Yeah. It's just crazy too, as well. When you think about Iran, though, right? You think about the stigma they have in the United States. Like, people just still believe that Iran is like our enemy, like, right? You know what I'm saying? And this is with Donald Trump. You know, he did a lot of this crap too, as well, when he just kind of formed his alliances with Israel, these like unconditional alliances and stuff. And I was like, people, can you not see that? Do you know what we did to Iran? You know that our CIA removed one of their first democratically elected leaders in the 1950s? Mossadegh, like, you know what I'm saying? Name me a time when Iran has attacked us. Yeah. Well, and it's like, but yet still the stigma that they're our enemy, that we need to watch them. What happened when they had the embassy and they held all the hostages? That's the one thing that people will point to. And once again, I'm not condoning that type of behavior and stuff like that, but look at the position Iran was in. You know what I'm saying? We put them in that position, and we continue to put them in that position. And that's why it's kind of interesting to see these alliances built between Nicaragua and Iran. Nicaragua, Iran, in Venezuela, right? Same type of alliance.
Yeah, absolutely. Same type of alliance. Again, these are all sanctioned nations. And then you include, of course, Cuba. And Syria, of course, is now joining China's Belt and Road Initiative. This is, again, a very important development. And they're diving into, of course, this Chinese economic project. We've been talking about the Belt and Road Initiative FASTA for a few years now. It's the latest sign of strengthening relationships between Damascus and Beijing. And the head of Syria's Planning and International Cooperation Commission, Fadi al-Khalil, signed a memorandum of understanding with China's ambassador to Syria, Feng Biao, today on Syria joining the Belt and Road Initiative. The program will help Syria, quote, open broad horizons of cooperation with China and other countries, the official Sana news outlet reported. And then, of course, this is a major foreign policy endeavor of the Chinese President Xi Jinping that seeks to create economic connections over land and sea between China and the world. Under the initiative, Chinese firms and financial institutions fund roads, ports, internet infrastructure, and more throughout the world. Various countries in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America are participating with varying degree of involvement, according to the Council of Foreign Relations. And of course, again, several other nations have joined us, including Saudi Arabia, Iran and Turkey, which is really interesting. But of course, we also have to keep in mind the fourth industrial revolution and how Xi Jinping is involved. He's he's constantly going there. He's going to continue going there. So it's something to actually watch. Is China going to attempt to be the new empire in control of everything? This is one of the things that people fear. The people on the right, they're like, well, if we're not in power, somebody else will take power. Or are people going to demand a cooperative relationship where people cooperate and they, that is like the utopia that we all imagine, where everybody trades, where everybody is benefits from a mutually beneficial relationship. That's what the vast majority of these countries want, especially in Nicaragua, where they're talking about we want peace. We don't want, we don't want these luxuries. We just want to get our people out of poverty. That's why they're doing this alliance, because they want to get people out of poverty. And if your goal is to get people out of poverty, if that's China's goal, then they're going to work with China. They're going to work with whoever and anybody is what Ortega said. He's willing to work with anybody. And he constantly reiterates he doesn't hate the American people, but it's the tyrannical imperialist American government that has done these things to them, that has backed an attempted coup in 2018 that led to a lot of destruction and death for the people of Nicaragua. That's led to the destruction and death of so many people via sanctions, including Venezuela, Cuba, and the U.S.-backed Bolivian coup that happened in 2019. And so that's where they're at, fams, and that's what we have to be watching. We really got to watch to see what is happening. But this is the most important thing to know, is that this is a new era seen from the perspective of Nicaragua and many other countries. They're also trying to build a kind of like what used to be the old Central American Republic. So they're going after Bukele, because Bukele has refused to cooperate. So they've made talks with Honduras. They've made talks with I think was it Guatemala and others, to kind of form some sort of economic alliance to kind of bring back this cooperative relationship. But Bukele doesn't want to sign up to that.
Right, fam? What about on these shows? And this is so important, because I'm thinking about what's the next moves from the empire over here. We saw the jumpiness of the Biden administration as far as when it comes to foreign policy. All those same people, those anti-Russian people, got right back into office. These pro-NATO war hawks like the Victoria Nulands and the John Sullivans, who are still kind of arguing the same friggin' kind of bullshit rhetoric about Russia moving troops around on their own border, attempting to invade Ukraine, and they're selling this bullshit, and they get away with it because people buy it. You know what I'm saying? And nobody understands what's going on, the actual intricacies of what's going on with this whole deal, what's going on with Nicaragua. We had talked about it before we were set to go, about how important this is, how this is a cataclysmic global shift over here. So I'm just wondering what the reactions are going to be from the West, from the empire. Israel's been going in and dropping bombs on Syria on a regular basis, on Iran on a regular basis. How much more is that going to be amped up? And what's going to go on with those countries now that these moves are being made? It was kind of quiet when Venezuela made these moves, kind of aligning themselves with Iran. But I don't think they're going to be quiet about this much longer, fam. So I'm very cautious and very nervous about what the empire's next moves are going to be when it comes to Nicaragua, when it comes to Iran. So we just have to sit back and wait and see. But it's good. I'm going to pat ourselves on the back for talking about these things, because people aren't talking about them, and they need to talk about them, because they're so consumed with what's going on at home that they don't even care what's going on overseas. And that is what the empire wants, so that you don't pay attention to what's going on overseas.
100%, fam.